I'm home.
There you are, Roll. Are you okay?
I don't know. I think I have a fever. Oh no, Roll!
I think Roll has come down with Robo-Enza. From what I can tell, the virus only affects robots. You all need to be careful. XX. A new robot illness, Robo-Enza, has begun to spread rapidly around the world, causing robots to malfunction. Many humans find it impossible to complete even simple tasks without their robot helpers. And, without robot assistance, no one can develop a proper cure. A month following the outbreak, the situation worsens. The infected robots turn violent in an attempt to take over the world.
Help!
Yeah, okay, that's heavy.
One of those infected robots went crazy and attacked me. I've spent the last few days studying this Robo-Enza. But even my genius was unable to find a cure. So I built a machine that would help me discover the key to developing a cure. But it was stolen by one of those demented robots. I beg you. You have to help me get my medicine-making machine back.
I suppose if we want to stop those robots, we'll have to help you.
Leave it to me. I'll stop those robots. I'll find Dr. Wily's medicine-making machine, and then we can cure Roll and all the other robots. Proto Man!
I don't think you'll be able to do this alone.
I'd appreciate any help, Proto Man. Let's do this!
Hello everyone, and welcome to Let's Play Mega Man 10. Getting to this game a bit sooner than I originally planned to, but I'll get into that reason why later. As the game's intro hints to, we actually have a player select this time. Mega Man is as he was in Mega Man 9, he's basically the Mega Man 2 Mega Man with rush abilities. Proto Man is as he was in the DLC for 9. He has the charge shot, the slide, he has a shield when he's jumping. He's basically Mega Man 4, Mega Man onwards, only he takes double damage, so he's essentially a hard mode no matter what. However, released as DLC later on was base for $2, as you saw on the title screen. He is basically a dumbed-down version of his Mega Man in base appearance. He can shoot in 7 out of the 8 directions, he can dash instead of slide, and he even gets a boosted momentum jump if you press the jump button again afterwards. The only thing he's missing is a double jump, which for a game like this would honestly kind of break him. He's essentially an easy mode of sorts. He's also my favorite character to play as. However, for the purposes of this LP, we're playing as Mega Man for the most part. The other two will still get some attention, though. And returning from Mega Man 9 is a difficulty select. Normal is as the game was originally designed, death traps and enemies as they would be. To the left would be easy mode, which gets rid of some enemies and puts platforms over some death pits or traps to make it a bit easier for newer players. The Asaichi item from Mega Man 1 is all over the place too. There's also hard mode, but you get that for unlocking, for beating the game, which I haven't done on this file yet because, well, this is me playing through the Legacy Collection. And here are our 8 Robot Masters this time around, and there's a lot of good starting points here, but I'm starting with this guy. I love that remix. Also, I should note that hard mode this time around isn't just placement changing. Enemies and bosses outright have some new attacks in hard mode. Either way, welcome to the, I believe this is called the Old Castle, which is weird. I think this game actually has names for all the stages. And admittedly, this isn't the best first stage. Because Blademan stage has quite a few precarious jumps to make and quite a few sections that are very easy to die at. We can't do anything about that block right there yet, by the way. Not for a while, even with the pathway I'm going along. Either way, the stage admittedly starts off a bit vanilla, but the main reason that this stage can be annoying for first-timers, especially new Mega Man players, is these platforms. They're seesaws that move forward along a track, as you can see. And now they're starting to put them over death pits. For a new player, these jumps are surprisingly stressful to make, especially when enemies show up. And to add to that stress is a bit of an invisible timer. If you don't cause the platform to move for a certain period of time, the arrow in the center starts blinking and will then cause the platform to move backwards, even if you're still on it. Plus, you get a mini-boss very early in this stage, which for new players can be kind of annoying. Especially because this guy actually has some pretty good accuracy. Although, if you're playing his base, this is a very easy mini-boss just because you can aim directly up at the eyeballs. You're gonna see me taking some dumb hits early on just because I didn't really practice for this one. Most of my practice with this game was when I last played it, probably upwards of 3 or so years ago. But, yeah, I get better. Now, to go into my history with 10, as I believe I mentioned back in 9, I played 10 before 9. And it's not like I was not excited for 9. I was very excited to see Mega Man go back to its classic routes like this after so long. Especially because at that point, 8 had been out for I think close to a decade. I just, for some reason, skipped out on it. I believe it's just because I didn't have the funds readily available at the time, which it happens. But when 10 was coming out, I was really excited for it because I actually got to play as Proto Man, and Proto Man at the time was actually my favorite Mega Man character. So I was very excited for that. Then I played him and got my ass kicked. In fact, I distinctly recall my brother beat this game when I wasn't home. Back in, let's see, 2010. I think that was 8th grade for me. I distinctly recall what was happening, too, because I wasn't at school yet. I had to go to the orthodontist for one of my earlier stages of braces. It wasn't the braces themselves yet. It was I think it was called a lower lingual holding arch or whatever. And my brother distinctly texted me going, I beat the game. And honestly, I don't blame him because, honestly, if you're new to the series or to the game, start the game off as a Mega Man. Proto Man, I recommend playing if you're first-timer on easy mode, because the damage he takes is ridiculous. In fact, if you want my overall recommendation for difficulties and selects, play normal mode as Mega Man, play easy mode as Proto Man, and after you've unlocked it, play hard mode as base, if you have him. Although, if you're playing the game for the first time, you probably do anyway. That is a challenge that I unlocked just because I got here. Either way, it's time for Blademan, and Blademan himself I actually used to have a lot of issues with before I figured out his pattern. Basically, just continuously run towards him unless he hesitates on a wall, because that means he's gonna jump onto the floor and try to slash at you. If you just run towards him and keep towards the wall behind him when he's on the ceiling, he's actually very easy to Mega Buster. In terms of where I used to go for my first Robot Master in 10, I actually started with, I think, Nitro Man when I was younger. But most playthroughs I had to go for Blademan now or Sheepman. Blademan, though, I recommend going for first because in a similar situation to Metal Man from Mega Man 2, his weapon is really good. Alright, get down here. There you go. I don't believe there's any challenges in this game for beating certain Robot Masters within a certain time frame. I think all the challenges more or less are... Well, more accurately, the challenge system has been changed. There are still those you unlock just by playing, like Destroyer for destroying 1,000 enemies and such, but for the most part, things are a bit different. Either way, from Blademan, we get Triple Blade, which is a really good weapon. It is fires 3 knives at 3 different trajectories depending on whether or not you're jumping around the ground. And that has some pretty good coverage on its own. However, if you're right in front of an enemy, that does a lot of damage because all 3 hits. It's also basically really good against any boss fight because they will take all the damage.
Welcome back, Megaman. You can use the screws you've collected to purchase items from the shop.
Alright, the shop's a bit the same as it was. We got 1-ups here, E-tanks, weapon tanks, M-tanks are back. Megaman's actually the only character that can buy M-tanks. You got the, I think it's called the shock absorber, which I believe decreases your knockback, or is it decreases damage? I forget. Eddy call, which calls down to drop an item. Beat call, which will save you from pits. Shock guard, which saves you from spikes. The energy balancer, which we're gonna need to get because that makes any excess weapon energy go into the lowest weapon. And also returning from Mega Man 9 is the Buck of Haircuts, which if you use, gets rid of Mega Man's helmet, but I believe turns his defense into that of Proto Man, so he takes double damage. Not really good to me. My first goal is to get the energy balancer. We'll be getting the other 2 things later. But now we're playing as Proto Man. Notable, Proto Man and Base don't actually have intro cutscenes. And we're going to be using Proto Man against our next Robot Master, Strikeman. Who's actually one of my favorite designs in the game. In fact, Mega Man 10 has some really good Robot Master designs. And I believe this stage is called the Stadium. And I love this theme. It's actually a pretty good stage to bring Proto Man into, too. Well, I say into as if you could switch characters at will. This isn't Mega Man X5. If you start with a character, you're stuck with that character on that save file. But yeah, this is what Proto Man played like back in Mega Man 9. He has the charge shot that has a bit of a non-sound effect. It's sadly not the usual one. He has a Proto Jet and a Proto Coil, which replace the Rush Coil and Jet. Though, in fact, that's one way he's actually better than Mega Man. He gets his Jet ability right from the start. With Mega Man, we need to wait a bit. He has a shield that can block projectiles, and he can slide as usual. But as you can see, even as early in the stages we're in, he takes a lot of damage. That mini-boss, by the way, is pretty annoying, mostly just due to the soccer balls that bounce around. Because they're pretty hard to predict, and unless you jump at the right time, you're probably going to get hit by them. They like to bounce into you as you're trying to jump on the hands to shoot the head. Now, seeing some of these jumps reminds me something that I think is in the game, but I swear is also just my mind playing tricks on me, potentially because I think Proto Man's sprite's just a slight bit shorter. Is that I believe the peak of Proto Man's jump is a slight bit lower than Mega Man's. That's more than likely just my mind playing tricks on me because he's slightly shorter to begin with. But it is worth noting because that can screw you over if you're in a psychological mood where your jump is a bit lower. The charge shot with Proto Man, though, is kind of grossly ineffective against boss fights. Because from my knowledge, it does more damage, but at the point where you're charging up for it, you might as well be using your standard buster shots anyway. It's not like, say, X4 where the plasma shot's really good, or the X series in general where your charge shots can be really good. Now, if you actually want a real challenge, if you've already beaten the game, that is, I do recommend trying the game with Proto Man on hard mode, because that is the hardest the game will ever get for you. And now it's time for this mini-boss again, but this time with some electric barriers to try and get in your way. Ow, my face! You will be dying as Proto Man a lot. Base and Mega Man, probably not as much, but due to his halved defense, it's very easy to die very quickly. In fact, this game's equivalent to the Big Eye enemies that were in Mega Man 1. I want to say they kill you in 3 shots with Proto Man, with touch damage at least. If it's not 3, it's 4, and that's pretty disgusting. Ow. Oh, that's right. I think Proto Man also receives double the knockback that Mega Man does, which, that can be annoying. I almost said Nitro Man. Strikeman's stage on the whole has some fairly annoying enemies, namely the ones in the lockers, but beyond the mini-boss, the most annoying thing is when they start to pair up the baseball enemies with something, just because having to keep in mind that many projectiles at once can be a bit challenging for newer players. Oh, well, can't get that now. Bolts are still very important to get throughout the game because one thing that this game actually has, and when I think about it, is there's a real shortage of E-tanks throughout the stages, compared to some of the other ones at least, and that can be kind of dangerous. Either way, it's time for Strikeman, who with his weakness is really easy because you just have to get really close to him. He likes to throw his Rebound Strike across the room, which will actually bounce all over the place and gain power as it bounces, I believe. Then he tries to bounce around like a ball himself, generally going for either tall but short jumps or low but far jumps. If you stay really close to him, though, as you can see, he gets torn to pieces by that triple blade. And for beating him, we get his Rebound Striker weapon, which is a little ball that can be fired either straight ahead or diagonally up and down, depending on what direction you're holding. It does bounce around the walls, I want to say 6 or 7 times. And the more it bounces, the more powerful it gets. At its strongest, it actually raises its damage by 5 units. As you saw there, glue white to note that. And that is important to know for bosses that are weak against it, like the next one. Though it's also very hard to hit it when it's bouncing around that much. Before we head on along, though, let's actually take a look at Proto Man Shop, because it is a little bit different.
Hello there. You can use those screws to buy stuff in the shop.
You got a 1-up, an energy tank, a weapon tank, beat call, shock guard, and the energy balancer. As you can see, some things are generally a bit more expensive to compensate for his higher difficulty, and he's also missing some items. But in the long run, that also makes his run a bit simpler. Also, hi Tango, next to Totally Not Auto. Haven't seen you since Mega Man World 5 for the Game Boy. How you been? But I can't really buy anything now that I want, so I'm just going to save up and head on to the next stage with Bass. My original plan for this LP was to basically just alternate every stage, like go Mega Man, Proto Man, Bass, so on and so forth. But I just decided to essentially play the game 3 times and just show the differences as we went through. Bass, though, is my favorite character in the game, because while he can't shoot through walls, that ability to aim in 7 out of the 8 directions really makes his run a bit more interesting in terms of how you want to take out some enemies. Notable, though, similarly to Mega Man and Bass, his individual bullets do less damage to compensate for the higher rate of fire. As an added bonus, though, that not only can you shoot in 7 out of the 8 directions, but in the case an enemy has a shield, like a Sniper Joe or these things, if you shoot their shield enough, it gets knocked off. Either way, the main gimmick, well actually no, one more thing, this is Treble Boost. It's back from Mega Man and Bass. It's essentially its replacement for Rush Coil and Rush Jet. It's 1 bar, but you get free-flowing movements, plus your buster gets turned into a spread buster with a lower rate of fire, yes, but the damage is restored to that of a Mega Man buster shot, so pretty useful, especially against like your first boss fight. Either way, the main gimmick of Sheepman stage is these oddly patterned tiles. When you step on one, the group of its color start to blink and then vanish. The big pattern is, the main gimmick of the stage is using these and platforming in such a way that you can use them to your advantage, be it to reach bolts like this or to avoid instant death. There's a secondary gimmick of these conveyor belts. When you run on them long enough, they charge the platforms of that type to my right, and the bar on them represents how much energy they have left. You can either use them to get up to higher pathways that have other goodies, or just to avoid instant death. This is actually the premier first stage, I think, for newer players, because it doesn't actually get too hard. The hardest part for new players is probably the mini-boss right here, honestly. Meet Octobull. You need to run on these platforms while he spawns 2 of those little octopus, jump on the platforms, and then shoot him. Triple Blade's really good for that, but if you're Bass, you can just shoot right up into his face. This can be hard for newer players just because the platforms can be a bit tiny, as you can see, but he goes down with enough time anyway. Now, you remember how I mentioned that easy mode gets rid of some enemies and also places the Yasaichi from Mega Man 1 all over the place? There's essentially 1 Yasaichi per stage, if not 2, and they're usually right after a mini-boss or around the checkpoints. They really make easy mode easy. Now obviously, since this was released after Mega Man and Bass, there's a lack of Mega Man and Bass bios. However, there are little blurbs that describe all of the Robot Masters of this game. For instance, Blademan was the tour guide for that castle we fought him in before he came down with Robo-Wenza. Strikeman, I think, was a batting practice robot that malfunctioned. And Sheepman here, in cyberspace, by the way, which is I think what this stage is supposed to be called, was a sheep herding robot that went into, like, static resistance or something. I remember a lot of these bios, but at the same time, my memory of them is more or less from when those informations first came out. Oh, hey! Our good buddy reappearing, disappearing blocks. Came to see you early. Though they're actually very rare in this game. I think this is the only stage they appear in from the top of my head. Yeah, barring one stage, it's a bit different. We'll go over those later. But as you can see, treble boost just allows me to say, screw you, I'm out of here. Past the Blademan stage, though, if you take him out first, I do recommend using Triple Blade as almost a main weapon, just because not only is it really powerful against enemies due to its, like, 3 hits at a time, but it can also, if you're right in front of an enemy, get past most shields. And that's a weapon tank. Weapon tanks were actually changed from Mega Man 10. Whereas in prior games, they refilled every single one of your weapons. In this game, they refill one weapon that you have to select. Which makes them in some ways a bit less useful, but it also makes using them a bit more strategic, which is a balance I kind of like. Either way, it's time for Sheepman, so get on out the Rapid Striker, or Rebound Striker. And admittedly, even with his weakness, Sheepman can be annoying. He's actually a bit easier with the bus drive wave beam in his base. He has 2 major attacks. He can throw a little static ball that goes in a couple of different wave formations at you, but his main attack is to jump into clouds like this that split into 4. Each cloud will then shoot a lightning wave at the ground. However, he's always in the last cloud to shoot its shot out. Notable though, when his cloud shoots its lightning down, it will cause static balls to go along the floor, so you need to jump at that point. As you can see, he went down pretty quickly there, but if you're trying to get the maximum damage from Rebound Striker, which I think can do upwards of 8 damage to him when it's at its most powerful, that fight can be kind of annoying just due to having to figure out which way you want the Rebound Striker to bounce and such. And for beating him, we get Thunderwool as our ability, the cloud attack he was actually using. You fire a cloud out, which goes a little bit forward, but mostly just gains some vertical height, and then zaps lightning down. It can hit enemies multiple times, which can be pretty useful, but on the whole, it's probably one of the most situational weapons in the game. Either way, before we end the part off, let's go into Hit Base's shop.
Screws! Exchange them!
Meet Reggae. He's a character that showed up a couple times in the Mega Man series, namely if you got a password wrong in Mega Man 7, and he was also Base's shop clerk in Mega Man and Base Challenger from the Future on the Wonder Swan. But in terms of Base's shop, it's more or less the same that we've seen as Proto Man. Extra lives, energy tanks, open tanks, energy balancer, shot guard. Treble item and treble rescue are basically just Eddie call and beat call just for treble, and therefore are probably not the most useful. But as you can see across my stages thus far as Base, all 3 of them, I actually got some decent screws, so I can buy the energy balancer as well as an energy tank. You do want to prioritize energy tanks on the whole, but you do want to get weapon tanks as we go through. But with that, let's save as Base just to get that out of the way. And with that, I'm going to need to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching, and in part 2, we'll be continuing on as Mega Man for the most part, and Proto Man and Base may be making a brief appearance, but for the most part, it's just going to be him, and seeing what our next batch of Robot Masters has awaiting for us. See you guys then.